Hey Charlie, it's your big sister Teddy here. So, as you know, I had to move away from home for a few years because I'm in college now. I miss you and our big crazy family, but, anyways, right now I'm in this genetics class called Principles of Genetics, learning about phenotypes, genotypes, and modes of inheritance. That must sound like a different language to you, but don't worry, I'll explain my project. So, I'm making a pedigree of our family starting with grandpa and grandma. It's gonna look so cute. So, the trait of interest is musical ability or talent, which, as you know from Dad always talking about his band, the Bob Duncan Experience, runs in the family. Because I can sing really well too. So I'm going to do the best that I can to explain this all to you in the next couple of minutes. But if you're ever in a life science major at college and have to take genetics, well, good luck, Charlie. The horizontal lines are marriage, which is why we started with grandpa and grandma. Then, the vertical lines are the offspring of that marriage. So as you can see, we have 3 generations based on the Roman numerals, starting with grandpa and grandma. A blue box or circle means that someone is affected or has musical talent, and a blank one means that they do not. And as you can see, squares are men and circles are women. Musical talent is not an X-linked dominant trait because the allele being passed down from our grandparents to Dad was a big H on the X from Grandma and a Y from Grandpa. Since Mom's genotype has 2 big H's on her X chromosome, all of us kids would need to have musical talent phenotype, since the cross would be all homozygous dominant genotypes. Musical talent is not an X-linked recessive trait because of essentially the same reasoning as the last example, but in reverse. If Mom and Dad had only little h's, they could not produce offspring without musical talent. Even if Mom was heterozygous for this locus, their offspring would still have a 75% chance of being musically talented, which doesn't work here. The trait is autosomal dominant when Mom is heterozygous dominant for this allele. This way, Mom and Dad can pass both a big and little h down to us, or too little or too big, depending on the phenotype. The trait cannot be autosomal recessive because since Mom and Dad are both affected, all offspring would have the phenotype of musical talent. This would mean that Mom, Dad, and all offspring would all have to be homozygous recessive on their alleles. Since Gabe and Charlie are not affected on this locus, we know that this is not possible. It is also not possible for this trait of musical talent to be holandric or Y-linked because since men can only carry Y chromosomes, Grandpa Duncan would have to be affected by this genotype. So would Gabe because our dad is. Only men can pass Y-linked traits down to their sons.